I seen Diddy. He rubs me on my shoulder. He asks me, how are you liking my house? And he kind of like startled me a little bit. I started to see unusual things, people skinny dipping in the pool, P. Diddy running around like a crazy animal. But then I get something different from Diddy. When he comes to me and he's rubbing on me and he's asking about, do I like his house? I'm feeling like a dark energy, like in his eye. And I'm like, why is it giving scared? Like he's trying to, with his power, like, how are you liking my house? Like anything you want, let me know. Like, and then he tells me, go in the house. Till I look over it and I see some little people. So I'm like, what's going on over there? They look dressed up,
How old did they look, in your opinion?
Elementary.
That is so disturbing.
Maybe like 9, 10 or whatever. I mean, that's what I was trying to see. Like, how tall are these?
Yeah, I mean,
I just wanted the faces is what got me.
If you look for the iceberg of the most disturbing films, this is definitely on there, bro. Megan is missing.
And you've watched this specific movie?
Not all the way. As soon as it turned into the point of view of the kidnapper, I couldn't watch it no more, bro. This is like a found footage type of film. From Megan's point of view to the friend's point of view. They're 14-year-olds. They're like best friends. Megan decides to try and help Amy by taking her to one of the parties that she goes to. They're doing drugs, getting drunk and in one of the scenes, you also see Megan doing a sexual act for. Already right off the bat, this movie gives off this weird vibe. One of the people in the party ends up giving Megan a contact to some guy named Josh. The only way that she contacts him is through Skype.
This already sounds sus, bro.
Josh is saying, oh, he's 17. His camera's always turned off. She doesn't know what Josh looks like, only his voice. It gets to a point where they obviously get close enough, and Josh is like, yo, we should meet up. I'm shy, so we should do it in a place where it's just us.
Oh my gosh.
Let's meet up behind this diner. The next scene in the film is surveillance footage, her being taken by some unknown guy. So Amy decides to personally try to investigate where the fuck she could be. The next scene is she's recording herself under a bridge. She sets it down, and then you see a man behind her, and then that's the last time they see Amy. So now Amy and Megan are missing.
What the?
And I forgot to mention that in one of the scenes in the movie, there was these pictures of Megan that were surfacing on these fetish websites of her in bondage. This is why Amy decided to go on her own investigation. And those pictures, the director himself said that he was inspired
by a real life case,
by pictures that he's seen on the dark web of a girl.
It was you guys that found the body of this missing girl. Now, tragically, this case ended in disaster, but if it wasn't for social media, she wouldn't have been found. It was the 6th of August 2022 in Truckee, California. The area is super rural, and it's common for teenagers to kind of hang out in the woods and in the outdoor areas. Especially in the summer as well, like there's really lovely, gorgeous open spaces, outdoor areas near to like reservoirs and things where kids just love to hang out. On the day in question, they were doing just that. Kylie Rodney, aged 16, was with a bunch of other teenagers heading to an outdoor party. She was just about to start music college and she was incredibly talented. As you can see, she was gorgeous, and everybody who knew her just described her as this lovely, warm character, just such a ball of energy. Kylie and her friends headed to a campground by a reservoir and all started partying together. There ended up being over 300 people at this party. Now, mostly they were teenagers, but there were some other older guys there as well. And unfortunately, there was a lot of underage drinking going on and underage substance taking as well. Eyewitnesses from the gathering reported seeing Kylie kind of late on into the evening, looking a little bit worse for wear, kind of like stumbling over her feet a little bit. Then she vanished. She had apparently decided to drive home on her own under the influence back to her parents' house, but tragically she never made it. Her parents were obviously extremely worried the next day when she just hadn't returned and she hadn't even gone to stay with her friends or anything like that. There was absolutely no sign of her, so they ended up reporting her missing to police. An absolutely huge search began, and loads of local volunteers joined in with the police forces to try and find the missing teenager. That's when horrific rumours started circulating that maybe this was something to do with the older guys at the party. There were whispers that these guys were even seen giving substances to young girls. And police actually asked people at the party to come forward, anybody who was at the gathering, come and talk to us, tell us what you know. But people stayed suspiciously quiet. This only added fuel to the fire of those rumours that somehow someone was involved. So investigators looked into where Kylie's phone last pinged, and they found out that it pinged at 12:33 a.m. near that campground and then just went dead. This is where TikTok came in and really saved the day. An account called Adventures with Purpose is a voluntary organisation that posts on social media like YouTube and TikTok. They stepped in to help with the search. Now, they have amazing equipment which can be used to kind of facilitate searches like this, and they're largely funded by the public, by donations they get off TikTok. And they were the ones who found Kylie. She was submerged inside her vehicle in Prosser Lake. The cause of death was deemed accidental drowning. Now, despite the rumours, police state that there is no evidence of any kind of foul play.
How do you go missing after getting out of a taxi one night and then end up dead in the water tank of a motel 13 days later with severe trauma to your body and signs of SA, all accidentally with no foul play? Because that's what the police are saying happened to her, and I am not buying it. This is the mysterious death of Debani Escobar, and nothing has disturbed me more than this last photo of her. Debani was an 18-year-old law student who disappeared on April 8th, 2022. That night, Debani went to a party with two of her friends at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo, Mexico. As the night went on, her behavior became more and more erratic, which was not like her. And at one point, she got into a fight with one of her friends and ended up locking herself inside the men's bathroom. What that fight was about is unknown, but her friends reportedly wanted to leave without her because of it. But before doing so, they called her a DD driver to pick her up from the party and take her home. A DD driver is like an Uber driver, and so the driver, who was a man, picked her up at 4:17 a.m. At some point during the drive, the two were seen on nearby security footage arguing in the car, and according to the driver, he said it was because he was trying to ask Debani for her address and a guardian's phone number, but she refused to give it to him. The driver then says that Debani groped him, and these are just the words coming from his mouth. But according to Debani's dad, the security footage that was obtained actually shows the driver inappropriately touching Debani. After this altercation, Debani got out of the car right there on Highway 85 in Monterey, and this is reportedly an extremely dangerous stretch of road where many people have gone missing before. The driver then took this final photo of Debani alone, standing on the desolate highway in the middle of the night. He then texted this photo to the friend that scheduled this ride for Debani. I'm assuming that he did this because he wanted to explain the situation and let her know that Debani got out of the car. After waiting for several minutes to see if Debani would get back in, he drove off, leaving her alone. About 5 minutes later, Debani was seen on security footage walking to the Alcosa Transportation Offices, which is a trucking company in the Nueva Castilla neighborhood. But because it was so early, nobody was there to help her, so she walked away. Not long after this, Debani is seen on security footage again, arriving at the Nueva Castilla motel alone. This is a really almost run-down motel on the side of the road, and it looks pretty desolate. The last time Debani was seen alive was when she was caught on security footage looking through a restaurant's window. And that restaurant looks attached to the motel, but I could be wrong. It also kind of looks abandoned. After this, Debani disappeared, and what followed has never been explained. The next day, her dad reported her missing to the state attorney general's office, and a massive search for her began. And when I say massive, I mean hundreds of police officers and volunteers using drones and tracking dogs. The last photo that the driver took of Debani then went viral on social media, and this is what sparked the public outcry over her disappearance. So of course the driver was interviewed, but I guess authorities believed what he had to say because he was never arrested or charged with anything. The location of this photo was shared with police, and it was smack dab in the center of the 3 locations surrounding her disappearance and where she was last seen on security footage. Those locations were the house party, to where she got out of the car, and then finally to the Nueva Castilla motel where she was last seen. So police searched the motel extensively, 4 times to be exact, but Debani was nowhere to be found. But then, 13 days later, a gruesome discovery would be made. One of the motel employees began noticing a foul smell coming from one of the water tanks, and it continuously got worse. So when they went to investigate, they opened the water tank and found a decomposing body. So needless to say, police were called, and the body was discovered to be Debani's, but she was so decomposed at this point that the only way they could tell it was her was by the necklace that she was wearing. They then found her purse in the next water tank and her phone and keys in the third. This is incredibly sad because this was only a block and a half away from the trucking company where she tried to get help. According to the government's autopsy, they said that Debani fell into the underground 12-foot water tank, hit her head, and drowned, and that this was all just a tragic accident with no foul play involved. But Debani's dad didn't trust this, and he had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. And this was mainly because the police had already searched the motel's property 4 times before she was found. He thought that something was trying to be covered up, so he had a second independent autopsy done, and the findings are bizarre. This autopsy found that Debani had been sexually assaulted and physically abused before she died, and the official cause of death was from a deep cranial contusion. So because of these findings, there were many rallies and protests in Mexico that called for a more thorough investigation into Debani's death. One thing that would have helped tremendously in the beginning while searching for Dabani was security footage from inside the motel. But the manager of the motel, along with one of the front desk employees, claimed that there was no security footage to be given. They said the motel does have cameras, but that they don't record and are strictly for monitoring purposes. But suddenly, out of nowhere, hours of video footage emerged that shed some light into what happened the night Dabani disappeared. Video footage from the motel showed Dabani entering the property that night alone, but instead of going to the front desk, she went to a garden out of sight. About 20 minutes later, she's seen walking by the motel's empty pool and towards the water tank, and that was the last time she was ever seen alive. Because of how shady everything seemed, a third autopsy was conducted that required Dabani be exhumed, and surprisingly, the results were more grave than before. This final autopsy showed that Dabani actually died from asphyxiation. She had been strangled, and absolutely no water was found in her lungs. Her body showed extreme signs of violence, and the results also showed that she died between 3 and 5 days before she was found, meaning that she was alive for possibly up to 10 days before dying, which leads me to ask, where was she during that time? So many aspects of this case are still unexplained. First off, with her behavior being erratic the night she went missing, it seems likely that she could have possibly been drugged. And why was the first official government autopsy so wrong? Was it due to incompetence or corruption? Because of how fast they pushed that this was an accident, many people, including Dabani's family, feel like this was a cover-up. Her family believes that her body was somehow planted in the water tank because there is a ton of evidence that this was no accident. Some people suspect the driver because after one of Dabani's friends called to pick her up, he mysteriously turned off his driving app. Some believe that the motel is responsible because they lied about the security footage. And in fact, both of those employees were actually accused of making false declarations and concealing evidence, which is a weird thing to do if you're innocent. There is a possibility that somebody followed her into the motel from the trucking company that she stopped at, or even one of the guests at the motel. But unfortunately, since the video footage was withheld and everything around that being so sketchy, I don't trust that it wasn't tampered with in some way. What's crazy is the fact that while searching for Dabani, 5 other missing young girls were found in the process. But as of today, no one has ever been arrested in connection to her case. It's now been 2 years, and Dabani's death is still unexplained and unsolved, and how she ended up in the water tank that night remains a mystery.
This guy right here is a very known brujo. He's known in the specific part in Mexico called Catemaco. He's one of the most powerful ones, and he's known for taking you to the devil's cave, La Cueva del Diablo.
Oh, okay.
And is the middleman between you and the devil to make a pact. He guides you through the whole process. After a certain time, it's just you and the devil. But there's this one video, and he was talking about the reason why he has stopped doing pacts no more with the devil.
Porque la última vez me llegó un señor con un niño de 4 años y quería pactar, pero él quería ofrendar a ese niño. Un niño que no había vivido su vida. Él no quería control, él lo que quería era avaricia.
¿Qué ritual hace para ofrendar al niño?
Lo desmiembra con un cuchillo, con una daga. Esa sangre se lo quitan a los niños cuando ellos están en lo peor del miedo. Cuando tienen esa adrenalina es cuando se les saca la sangre a los bebés, a los niños.
What?
¿Se les saca la sangre mientras están vivos o
mientras tienen miedo?
He ended up saying is that you have to drink the child's blood when the child is at the highest peak of fear, and it's some sort of like drug.
Because of the adrenaline that they get.
That energy gets carried on into your body. It's like you feel some sort of high. They'd rather have them, keep them around scared than kill them. This goes on to the whole conspiracy revolving Monsters Inc. Right?
Well, okay, I think I know where you're gonna go with this, bro.
In Monsters Inc., their whole world, their whole city is powered by what?
Fear.
Coming from who?
The children.
Exactly. They don't kill the children. They keep them around in a constant state of
fear
and live off of that. And how does the liquid look when it powers up?
Blood.
A chef who has remained unnamed was cooking in a kitchen one day when something nightmarish happened. You see, he was cooking something in a deep fryer when he suddenly started twisting his head all demonically, and then threw his head into the deep fryer with no hesitation at all. His whole head was fried in oil, and he then died. A video of this went viral, and people thought he was possessed because why else would you turn your head like he did? And no sane person would just throw their head into a deep fryer. But the more believable reasoning for this incident was that he had some sort of mental illness, which was even noticed and pointed out by some of his coworkers. The video of it happening is very disturbing because 1 minute the chef is cooking food and doing his normal job, and then suddenly he starts twisting his neck awkwardly and then throws his head into the deep frying oil. It comes out of nowhere and it's like a jump scare. It's crazy how awful stuff like this happens and we will never know why. May this man rest in peace.
When I was 15 years old, Joe Gatto from the Impractical Jokers groomed me.
Impractical Jokers star Joe Gatto has been accused by another girl of misconduct. But this time the accuser is accusing Joe of grooming her when she was 15 years old. So this girl shared her story here on TikTok, and basically she states that she was a huge Impractical Jokers fan, and in 2015, when she was 14 years old, about to turn 15, she went through the Impractical Jokers cast Twitter accounts, found their Snapchats, and just decided to message them. She didn't expect anything back, but shockingly, according to her, who responded but Joe Gatto, saying at first, "Happy birthday." She then claims that they began to Snapchat almost every single day back and forth casually, until one day when she came home from school and he asked her to video chat. According to the girl, he asked her how tall she was, how much she weighed, and her bra size, and then said, "You're a fucking bombshell." That's a quote from her. She then states that he allegedly tried to get her to send him some more risque photos of her butt and chest. Keep in mind this was all going on over Snapchat where messages disappear. She felt uncomfortable though, and she wouldn't send him anything nude. Keep in mind she was a young teenager at the time, so this would have been very illegal. According to her, Joe then allegedly blocked her. Now she says that she knows she doesn't have evidence, and she realized back then if she talked about this, she could have gotten the show canceled. It would have been a huge thing. But she didn't want to face fans that would have been angry about the show getting canceled, people telling her she's a liar, and the hate that would have come from it. So she decided to hold that story close to her chest until now, when obviously lots of other women and girls have come forward saying that some inappropriate things happened between them and Joe. And with the new allegations against Merv from the same show coming out recently, that leaves only 2 of the 4 Impractical Jokers without any serious allegations having been levied against them. But as you know, I will definitely keep y'all updated when it comes to this unfolding, very disturbing story.
Today, we're diving into the intriguing story of Paul Berggren, a controversial figure in the legal world. Born in 1957 in New Jersey, Berggren started his career as a prosecutor. He quickly gained a reputation for his courtroom skills and taking on high-profile cases. He transitioned to defense work representing clients in criminal cases, including mobsters and notorious criminals. Berggren became known for his aggressive strategies and ability to challenge the prosecution effectively. However, his career took a dramatic turn. In 2010, Berggren was arrested and later convicted on charges related to racketeering and conspiracy. The prosecution claimed he was involved in criminal activities including witness tampering. Despite his fall from grace, Berggren's story raises questions about ethics and law and the thin line between defense and complicity. If you want to learn more about Paul Berggren, then you have to check out Criminal Attorney. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Dive into the crime-filled life of one of the most famous attorneys ever.
48 hours after her wedding, she was found murdered in a bathtub still wearing her wedding dress. It was the 12th of May 2012 in Illinois. Estrella Carrera, age 26, and Arnaldo Jimenez, age 30, had just tied the knot. They already had an absolutely beautiful family together. Estrella and Arnaldo had a 2-year-old son together, and Estrella also had an 8-year-old from a previous marriage. They met at a nightclub years earlier and immediately became infatuated with each other. They felt the logical next step was to get married in a gorgeous ceremony to celebrate their love and make things legally binding. The bride looked absolutely stunning on CCTV as she was spotted leaving a bar the night of her wedding, but it would be the last time she was spotted alive. It was actually the next day that police were called, and they were called because Estrella was due to pick her children up from her dad's house and never showed up. Her sister was really concerned about this because Estrella was a great mum. She was never late for anything. She would always be where she said she was going to be, especially regarding things around her children. So where was she? Well, her family and friends tried all desperately to get hold of her via telephone and she just wasn't answering. Some of them even showed up to her house and banged on the door and they got no response. Something was clearly wrong, and worries only grew when people started hearing whispers about the fact that an argument had been spotted the night prior, because the relationship between these two was far from perfect. In fact, they'd been a bit on and off, and they'd kind of split up and got back together a couple of times. And when they'd announced their engagement, some people didn't even realise they were back together. The wedding itself had even been somewhat of a surprise to people. They'd just kind of had a text about like a celebration of some sort, and they'd showed up, and it was these two's wedding. It was all pretty last minute and pretty strange, to be honest. Like I said, they'd been to bars that night. They'd been partying, going from club to club. They'd been chauffeured around all different areas of Chicago and then kind of called it a night at about 4 a.m. Then there was a really shocking revelation from Arnaldo's sister. She reportedly got a call from him and she said he sounded like he'd been crying. He told her that the pair had got into an argument and he'd left her bleeding. He then just hung up the phone and wouldn't answer, and he was completely uncontactable. Police headed over to the pair's apartment. They knew that they actually needed to probably just break the door down and see what was going on inside. And when they arrived at the apartment in Burbank, nobody could have prepared them for what they were about to find. In the bathtub was the bloodied body of this new bride. She was still in her beautiful sequined wedding dress. She'd clearly been the victim of an absolutely brutal attack. She had 18 stab wounds. Interestingly though, what the detectives were able to see from the crime scene was there was no blood spatter on the walls. It kind of seemed like she'd been killed elsewhere and then transferred to the pair's apartment. And there was no sign of any kind of break-in, any kind of forced entry. So that led the police, along with obviously the suspicious things that he'd been saying, to presume that Arnaldo might be responsible. Then Estrella's friends told officers something. Estrella had confided in them and said that she was only getting married to him because he'd threatened her. They said that he had told her he'd take her kids away if she didn't. This was kind of painting a picture that this really hadn't been a picture-perfect happy relationship like some people thought. There had also been a history of violence too, and Arnaldo had an extensive criminal record including violent charges and substance offences. But by now he was on the run. He'd already fled to Mexico and police believed that his brother had helped him. But they really just couldn't track him down and he remained a fugitive for 13 years. But it wasn't until his brother got in trouble with police for something kind of unrelated to this case that they searched his property and found Arnaldo's car. This car was hidden at the house and it's reportedly absolutely littered with forensic evidence. It's reported that there's loads of forensics linking Arnaldo to his wife's murder. He was finally apprehended and is being held in Mexican jail until his trial.
I don't usually come across a story that genuinely scares me, but this one does, because it involves a woman who disappears in the remote wilderness, and she is presumed dead. But over the next year, multiple people have claimed to see her, or possibly her ghost, in the area where she went missing. And each time they see her, she looks distorted and in a worse condition. This is the mysterious disappearance of Sandra Hughes, and I promise you it will freak you out. So let's talk about it. Sandra Hughes was a 54-year-old woman who loved the outdoors, so when the pandemic first started, she took the opportunity to solo travel and spend a lot of time in the wilderness by herself. Sandra last spoke with her family on June 26, 2020, and this is when she told them that she was going to camp alone in the Sierra National Forest. She was really excited as she had spent the last 6 months in California, often camping alone and gaining a lot of experience in the outdoors. She was actually known to be an outdoor expert and a survivalist, so when she told her family about her upcoming solo camping trip in the Sierra National Forest, they weren't too worried. So off Sandra went, but it wasn't long into the trip that things started to go wrong, and no one could have expected what was about to happen to her or other campers in the area for years to come. On July 1st, 2020, a couple of campers were hiking near Johnson Meadows just above Bass Lake in the Sierra National Forest when they stumbled across an abandoned campsite. It was a really eerie scene because it looked like the campsite had been completely destroyed, and a bunch of things were kind of just strewn around. The campers then found a folder that contained some important documents, like a birth certificate and a social security card. With the campsite being destroyed like this, the campers felt like something was really wrong. So they called police to report this, and when authorities arrived, they found that the campsite and documents belonged to Sandra Hughes. At this point in time, Sandra wasn't a missing person, but they did find it odd that all of her personal belongings were just abandoned like that. So they started to look for her to see if she was okay. Nothing immediate was found, but then 3 days later, Sandra was spotted. And this is when the story starts to get strange. So on July 4th, Sandra ended up crashing her car near the Chiquito Pass trailhead in Madera County. This wasn't far from her abandoned campsite, and it didn't appear that the crash was that bad. Other campers were around when it happened, and according to them, Sandra somehow collided with a tree, and her car ended up high-centered on a stump in a ravine. Based on witnesses and the damage to her car, Sandra wasn't going very fast at the time of the crash. Since other campers were around, they offered to help her, but Sandra refused, saying she was okay. She was then seen walking into the woods alone, and what happened after this has never been explained. It was at this point that Sandra was officially reported missing, and authorities became more concerned after her car crash. A massive search was launched for Sandra, and over the next few days, she was seen 2 more times by separate campers. They each said that she was barefoot and had a bruise on her face. At the time, the campers didn't know that she was a missing person, but they did try to ask if she was okay or if she needed help because she looked a little distressed. According to them, Sandra seemed like she wasn't there, and she ignored anyone that tried to talk to her, continuing to walk deeper into the woods, alone. This is when authorities thought that Sandra may have suffered a head injury after her crash just due to her bizarre behavior over those few days. Like I said, she wasn't going very fast at the time she crashed, and the damage to her car suggests that it wasn't that bad of a wreck, and those who talked to Sandra right after the fact said that she didn't appear injured. But I guess if you have a head injury, sometimes it's not always that easy to tell. So authorities cracked down on their search and brought in multiple different agencies, tracking dogs, and even searched for Sandra by air. But at first, nothing was found. Then a few days later, search and rescue found Sandra's sleeping bag inside Yosemite National Park, just 2.5 miles from the crash site. The sleeping bag matched her recent REI purchase, so they knew this belonged to Sandra, but she was still nowhere to be found, and authorities started to lose hope that she would be found alive. Then, seemingly out of nowhere a month later, Sandra was seen by 2 hunters. They are pretty adamant that it was her, and they saw her leaning against a tree near where she crashed her car a month earlier. The hunter said that she made eye contact with them, but didn't try waving them down for help, and at this point in time, she didn't look distressed or anything. They did say that she was noticeably thinner than her last known photos on her missing person poster though. After this, Sandra's case kind of went cold again, and to make things more difficult, a massive fire broke out in this exact area in September of 2020, and it lasted months. This burned up any potential evidence and quite literally changed the terrain, but surprisingly, Sandra's car didn't burn at all. Authorities had left it in the same spot where it crashed, hoping Sandra would return to it, because with her outdoor experience and multiple sightings, it really did seem like she was still alive out there somewhere. But after the fire and it being untouched, authorities then removed it since it was clear that Sandra would not be coming back to it. There would be no movement in this case until almost exactly 1 year after Sandra's disappearance, and what I'm about to say is genuinely so creepy. I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. So in July of 2021, a family decided to go camping in the Shut-Eye Peak area. They brought up their 4-wheeler, so it was going to be a really fun time. Or so they thought. About halfway through the day, they stopped to eat lunch, and this is when their 3-year-old son started pointing out their car window into an open meadow. He told his parents that there was a woman laying face down with her legs straight up in the air in the middle of the meadow. This 3-year-old said that the woman was dead and she wasn't able to talk or move, but she needed their help. This freaked his parents out really bad, so they went to go look around the meadow, fully expecting to see a dead body, but no one was there. When they went back to the car, the 3-year-old proceeded to say that the woman was still there in the exact same spot, and he was pointing directly at her. The woman was wearing a black shirt and jeans, and she had blue hair. And unbeknownst to him, this was exactly Sandra's description to a T at the time she went missing. He just kept repeating that this woman was dead and that she needed their help, so this freaked his parents out enough to make them pack up early and head home since they couldn't see anyone. When they got home, they decided to post their experience on Facebook to see if anyone knew anything about the area, and this is when they found out about Sandra Hughes, who matched the ghost description to a T. They then found out that she disappeared within 5 miles of where they were in the woods. So the parents gave this little boy a bunch of photos, some including Sandra, and he picked Sandra out as the woman he saw in the meadow immediately 3 separate times. The Madera County Sheriff's Office somehow saw this post online and actually contacted the family for more information. Sandra's case was still unsolved, so they thought it couldn't hurt to investigate this tip, even if it was paranormal. So the police, the little boy's dad, and the little boy went back out to where he had seen this dead woman/ghost, and authorities swept the area for literally anything, but they found absolutely nothing. Over the years, there have been multiple searches for Sandra, but it's like she vanished into thin air. Her family says that she was extremely organized and tidy, and she would have never left her campsite abandoned like that. There are a few theories as to what could have happened to her, ranging from accidentally dying of exposure, whether it was from a head injury or not. She could have been met with foul play at some point, or she could still possibly be alive out there somewhere, although the chances of that are slim. And some people believe that her ghost is now haunting the wilderness where she was last seen, and that all of those sightings of her are real. I personally do believe in ghosts, but I'm not entirely sure what to believe in this case. Regardless, it's now been 5 years since Sandra disappeared, and whatever happened to her out there in the Sierra National Forest remains a mystery.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A Subway worker was killed over an argument about too much mayonnaise. 26-year-old Brittany Macon was working at a Subway in Atlanta in June 2022. It was a normal day at work for her until a terrifying incident occurred. She was working with her colleague Jada Statham, who was 24 at the time, when a man named Melvin Williams entered the store. It's believed that after ordering food, an argument erupted between him and the employees over him having too much mayo on his sandwich. The store owner described how all hell broke loose. Brittany was shot and tragically died as a result. Jada's 5-year-old son was actually in the restaurant at the time and witnessed the whole hideous ordeal. Jada was shot, but thankfully she survived. Melvin is charged with murder and aggravated assault among other related charges. Thankfully, he is currently behind bars while he awaits his trial, which has not been yet scheduled.
My parents locked me in a freezer for 2 weeks. My name is Marina Sabatier, and I am 8 years old. I was born in 2001 of an unwanted pregnancy, and my mother initially abandoned me but changed her mind after a month and regained custody of me. From the age of 2, my mother began to abuse me. She deprived me of food, hit me, and made me take cold showers. She would take me to the basement to beat me so that the neighbors wouldn't suspect. She would also force me to eat my own vomit. As time went by, the torture became more and more violent. My parents would tie me to the bed with tape and force me, for example, to swallow spoonfuls of salt and vinegar. I stopped going to school because I was too mentally and physically exhausted from my mother's beatings, and the others might have suspected something. One day I succumbed to the beatings and died in the basement where I used to be beaten. My parents put my lifeless body in the freezer for 2 weeks, then put me in a plastic box and covered it with cement. Shortly after reporting my disappearance, my parents confessed to my murder and were sentenced to just 30 years in prison.
Have you ever wondered why no anime character looks like a human? Well, that's because they're actually based off of cats. Okay, so this person asked, why in Japanese anime do none of the characters look Japanese? And it's because anime characters are cats. The goal of manga anime was neither Japanese nor Caucasian. The theory that if you pursue cute, it resembles a kitten is influential. No matter how you look at the profile nose, it's not human. And just take a look, that does not look like a human nose, but it does look like a cat's nose. Just look at this picture for 1 second. Are you actually going to tell me that these characters do not look like those kittens? It's honestly identical, and it's just cats in kind of a human form. Japanese anime characters are actually based on kittens and not Westerners. So the real question is, if you're obsessed with anime and think all the characters are cute or hot, does that mean you find cats attractive? I'm just joking, but this is absolutely mind-blowing and I never heard about this until today. So please let me know your thoughts on this because I'm extremely curious. This is what will happen when Kim Jong-un passes away. Up first, the entire country of North Korea will be completely devastated, and they will all be crying in the streets. This is because they literally look at Kim Jong-un as a god. This is because he brainwashed his citizens this bad that they actually believe this stuff. So it's like losing a parent to them. Next up, North Korea will most likely collapse. If political order was not restored quickly, the country could easily and most likely go into a civil war. Also, Kim Jong-un has no family member to take his place since he killed his own brother. That was the only one that could have taken his place. Next up, there very well could be a nuclear war. We all know Kim Jong-un has spent a lot of time and energy on creating and producing nuclear weapons, and we all know he threatened the world to use them multiple times. So what if his dying wish is to launch all of his nuclear weapons onto the world and just completely take everybody out with him? This is absolutely scary, but if there's one man that would do this, it's definitely Kim Jong-un. Okay, so this invention might be able to save you from the end of the world. Okay, so we all know that a great flood or a tsunami is one of the most likely things to knock out humanity. It's been told to happen in the past, like with Noah's Ark and other stories. But what if it happened today? How would we prepare? Well, an Australian shipbuilder whose name is Matt Duncan designed a tsunami survival pod that can withstand 6 tons of debris and hold up to 4 people. And the thing is, it only cost $8,500, so let me know if you're going to get it.
died by drinking 14 liters of water in a competition to try to win a Nintendo Wii console. My name is Jennifer Strange, and I was 28 years old when I decided to participate in a competition that was broadcast on the local radio in California. The contest, called Hold Your Pee for a Wii, was simple. The person who could drink the most liquid in 1 hour without using the bathroom would walk away with a Wii, and I really wanted it for my children. The competition started, and I drank over 14 liters of water. I quickly began to feel dizzy, nauseous, and had a severe headache. Several times I complained about the pain I was experiencing, but the organizers pretended not to understand. One of the hosts even laughed, saying I looked pregnant. A few hours later, while I was at home, I died in my bathroom. My body had taken in more water than it could handle. I died, leaving behind my 11-month-old daughter, my 2 boys, and my husband. The local station KNBR, which had organized the competition, was sentenced to pay a fine of $1.7 million to my family, and the show's host, Dave Sholin, was fired.
This woman jumped off a top-floor balcony to escape her jealous boyfriend. 28-year-old Amy Beckley had been dating 28-year-old footballer Shaquille McDonald for about 6 weeks. Shaquille played professional football for clubs such as Derby County and Coventry. She said that in the first few weeks of them dating, he love-bombed her and showered her with affection. She was a single mum and really appreciated having someone looking after her and caring for her. However, she saw a completely different side to him when they were on a night out in March 2023. They'd been out in Arcadian in Birmingham when he accused her of speaking to a bouncer. He snatched her phone and keys and called her derogatory names and made her get in a taxi with him. In the taxi, he put her in a headlock, bit her, scratched her, and slapped her. After they got home, CCTV captured him launching another vicious attack at her. He smashed her into a concrete wall, dragged her inside, and strangled her repeatedly. She lost consciousness and he left the room, and when she came to, she tried to ring 999 on silent. However, she became so terrified of him that she jumped 14 foot from her top floor balcony to escape him. She broke both arms in doing so. Now, luckily her fall was broken slightly by a balcony below hers, and someone had been outside having a cigarette at the time. They helped her inside and got her some help. Police arrived and Shaquille tried to flee but was detained. Amy was in an absolutely horrific state. You can see the images on Google if you want to go and look at those, but they are really shocking. Shaquille was jailed for just 2 years and 8 months after admitting to actual bodily harm and strangulation.
I played darts on my mother's decapitated head. My name is Ed Kemper, and here's my horrible story. One evening, my mother returned drunk from an evening. She was making a lot of noise and woke me up, so in an excess of anger, I slit her throat and tore her head. I inserted my penis into her decapitated head. Then I hung his head on the wall and threw darts to play. I finally crushed the bones of the skull with my feet and pulled out his tongue. His tongue kept shouting and complaining. I ended up calling the police and denouncing myself. Then I was imprisoned for life. I wanted to commit suicide twice in prison, but I was saved by guards.
Man did the unthinkable to a hospitalised child in Blackburn. It was the 15th of May 1948 in Lancashire. June Ann Devaney was just 3 years old when she was admitted to Queen's Park Hospital in Blackburn with pneumonia. She was under the care of nurse Gwendolyn Humphreys on the night in question. Now, little June had actually improved quite a lot and she was due to be discharged the next morning. Then, disturbingly, at around 1:20 a.m, while the nurse was preparing things in the back room, she felt a cold draft and noticed a door open. She went to see what was going on and was horrified when she saw one of the cots was empty. She then noticed something terrifying, a trail of adult footprints leading to the door. The nurse raised the alarm and contacted police. At 3:17 a.m, tragically they found the little child's body. She was face down in the grass not far from the ward. She was partially clothed with bloodstains on her body. The hospital immediately became a crime scene and a murder investigation began. The post-mortem found that the child had been AR'd and had teeth marks in her. A taxi driver reported to police that he had picked up a man with a local accent close to the hospital on the night of the crime. Now, the killer's fingerprints were actually found on a bottle next to June's cot. Over 46,000 sets of prints were tested against these until finally a match. The killer was Peter Griffiths, who eventually confessed. He pleaded guilty due to insanity and said he was drunk at the time and killed June in a fit of rage. He was found guilty of the crime and sentenced to death and was executed aged 22.
Barbie has a much creepier history than I thought. I'm going to show you some theories about Barbie that have been keeping me up at night, and I cover all sorts of creepy and true crime stuff, so follow along. In 2010, Barbie released a doll that had a camera on her necklace as well as a video screen on her back. This doll has since been discontinued, but there's a lot of rumors about what happened to this footage when it was recorded. So people have always theorized that the footage was collected and sold either by Mattel or by someone more nefarious. And it's been mentioned how easy it would have been for hackers to collect and sell all this data. The FBI even put out a statement about it. Barbie also released and discontinued the Hello doll, which could listen to children and respond with over 8,000 pre-recorded answers. A lot of parents worried that these dolls were potentially recording their children and then selling that data, but this doll also has really concerning reviews. Like, people say that the doll won't take no for an answer. Like, if she asked if you wanted to hear a story and then you said no, she would actually push back and then just tell you the story anyways. And the doll would also ask really specific and targeted questions about children, like how big their families were and if they had any siblings. Was this doll just collecting market data on children, or was it something much weirder?
This former teacher made an unaliving pact with a student that she kidnapped and assaulted. This is Kara Dickey, and she was 34 years old when she assaulted a 14-year-old student of hers. Now, at the time of her arrest, Kara Dickey was a middle school teacher. She was married, she had kids of her own, but she somehow got involved with a 14-year-old student of hers. And quickly, the relationship between her and her student grew from platonic to extremely inappropriate. She was sending him inappropriate text messages, and at one point it began to get physical. And on the afternoon of June 16, 2008, she went to the kid's house, picked him up, supplied him with rum and various over-the-counter drugs, and then took him on a road trip visiting many locations around the Buffalo, New York area, all the while they were engaging in inappropriate behavior with each other, if you know what I mean. And in an even more disturbing twist, she actually made a pact with the child that she was abusing that they would both take their own lives if they were ever caught by the police. Obviously, this never happened because she was caught by the police, brought to trial, and she was convicted of the assault of a child. And she served a few years in prison for these charges, but she was released in 2014 and just 2 years later was back in prison because one day she said she was done with parole, she cut off her ankle monitor and went on the run. Now, obviously, the police eventually caught up with her again. She was sent back to prison, and then after her release in 2018, she violated the terms of her parole again and was sent back to prison. And this time, people thought that she may have been involved with another child. I don't know, people like this are dangerous, and this story goes to show that pedophiles aren't always men.
Part 2 of the Amara Carson case, just a quick trigger warning here. Amara's injuries are horrific and it's particularly hard to listen to. Amara had been beaten so severely that the multitude of fractures to her skull connected with each other. Her brain was torn, an arm and a leg had spiral fractures from being twisted. Her torso had been squeezed with a lot of force until her ribs and sternum broke, and there were 24 human bite marks all over her tiny body. Her head and face were completely swollen and bruised, her liver was torn, as was her private area, underneath her tongue was torn, and she'd also been strangled. The severity of Amara's injuries made it impossible to tell which was the final injury, so a cause of death couldn't be determined. Eventually it was determined that Amara had been tortured for around 30 hours, with different stages of the exorcism occurring. Blaine had been the one to cause all the injuries, while Jessica sat in another room listening to her daughter's screams. Jessica said that Amara had managed to escape the room a couple of times and run towards her, before Blaine took her back into the room to be tortured further. Jessica was fully complicit in the murder and she made absolutely no attempts to protect her child. The couple were arrested for the murder of baby Amara. They were both found guilty. Jessica was sentenced to life without parole for capital murder, while Blaine received the death penalty. Blaine Milan was due to be executed by lethal injection on January 21st, 2021. However, he won a stay of execution and remains on death row.
Okay, so this is kind of a weird thing that's happening, but the head of Scientology, David Miscavige, is reportedly missing. He's currently under investigation for child trafficking, and lawyers have tried to serve him 27 times in the last 4 months, but no one knows where he is. The charges come from 3 victims who claim that Miscavige forced them to work on boats as children after they were also forced to sign a $1 billion contract. In Scientology, they consider you to be an adult at 6 years old. One of the victims also claimed that after her mother left Scientology, the victim was forced to stay in a closet for 48 hours. All of this, of course, also comes after Shelley Miscavige, David's wife, has not been seen since 2007. even though recently it's been reported that she might be living in Big Bear, California.
This girl vanished after seeing H in concert in Birmingham. What police found in a park the next day shocked the community. Keely Bunker from Tamworth in Staffordshire had only just celebrated her 20th birthday. 12 days later, she was going to see H in concert to continue the celebrations. It was the 19th of September 2019 and Keely and her friend attended the show. Afterwards, they headed to the nightclub Snobs. The girls were having a seemingly normal night out and were surrounded by friends. This included 20-year-old Wesley Street. Now, Keely and Wesley were actually childhood friends. They'd known each other since infant school, so this wasn't unusual. They headed back to Tamworth in a taxi after the night out, and Keely's friend Monique actually offered her to sleep over at her house. However, Keely replied quite chillingly, "I've got Wes, he'll walk me back, it'll be fine." That evening though, Keely would not be fine. She trusted Wesley to walk her home, but he took her on a detour. It's believed that he may have convinced her to go to the rugby club to have a smoke with him. When Keely failed to turn up for an interview the next day, her dad rang the police. Everyone knew that Wesley was the last person to have seen Keely, so the police questioned him. He claimed that they had walked home together and he'd last seen her by a phone box by his house. He gave police a detailed account of their route back and seemed like he wanted to help. Tragically, Keely's body was found at 9 p.m. that night, lying face down in a pool near the edge of Wigington Park. Wesley was arrested and tellingly, police noticed he had scratches on his face. GPS, DNA and CCTV evidence all proved that Wesley's account of what happened that night was a lie. CCTV captured the pair at Tamworth Rugby Club at 4:23 a.m. Keely's bag was found a short distance away. Wesley's jacket was found in the park with makeup all over the sleeves. His DNA was also found on Keely during a post-mortem, which proved he had SA'd her. He was found to have choked her to death before going home to bed. In court, he was also found guilty of 5 further S offences which took place in 2015, 2017 and 2019. He faces a minimum of 29 years in prison.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
This entire family have been missing since February. Monica and her 2 sons, Aidan 11 and Nicholas 9, are thought to be in grave danger. So where are the Lutz family? Stephen Lutz, 44, a drug user and suffering from multiple personality disorder, turned up at the family home on the 10th of February in his pickup truck with a U-Haul attached to the back. The whole family left the residence and haven't been seen since. The phones have been disconnected and his wife and 2 sons are thought to be in grave danger. In January, Monica and her 2 sons were seen fleeing from the house barefoot. They ran to a neighbour's to call 911. Stephen had become extremely violent and had punched Monica in the face. Stephen was arrested, given a restraining order and warned to stay away from his wife and sons. Stephen was already known to the police. He'd been known to them since 2006 for his use of methamphetamine and for his violence. What's really scary about this story, and the main reason I think that this family are in danger, is that 11-year-old Aidan told his grandmother and his sister, who's estranged from the parents, that he twice walked in on his father talking to a clown mask on his bedroom wall. What he said sent actual shivers down my spine. He said, "I know what I have to do. I have to kill 3 people. First my wife Monica, then Aidan, and then Nicholas." This is the boy's older sister who's estranged from both her parents. Aidan had texted her on the day of the disappearance, saying that the family were going on vacation, but he didn't know where. His phone was disconnected shortly after. The family home was inspected on April 3rd. There were sheets on the windows, and the once immaculate house looked as if a tornado had hit every corner. There was an open suitcase on the bed, and it looked like someone had been packing but got disturbed. According to Gia Wright of the Missing Persons Awareness Network, Stephen had stole $10,000 from a safety deposit box belonging to his mother the day before the disappearance and told her, "You're never going to see me again." The last place that the family's phones pinged their location was Richmond, Indiana, and their car registration plate has been scanned in 7 states in the US, but hasn't been registered for several weeks. It's an absolute mystery, and I pray that this family are found before something terrible happens.
This is Ghost Rider 2.0, one of the worst cartel execution videos ever explained.
Just like the Ghost Rider cartel video, this video is extremely hard to watch. The video is kinda short, lasting only 1 minute and 35 seconds, and as you play the video, you see a man with his hands tied behind his back, and he is sitting on the ground wearing jeans and a blue shirt. His head is bleeding and it's clear he got multiple injuries off camera. Multiple men can be heard in the background and one of them seems to be interrogating the victim. As the victim is being interrogated, another man pulls the rope around his wrist, making sure it's tight. And for whatever reason, they place a hat on the victim's head. The leading theory is that it represents some gang which maybe the victim is part of. They then smack the victim around for a couple seconds, then another man enters the shot carrying a log that was recently in a fire. The log is smoking and smoldering, but it's not on fire. You see the hot charcoal glowing at the end of the log. The man then gets the log and places the hot end against the victim's chest, which makes the victim let out a terrifying scream. The victim then rolls around on the ground trying to get away from the man, but he then places a hot log against his back, and again causing the victim to scream horribly. The video then jump cuts and it shows the man pinning the victim down with the log by pushing it into the back of his neck. This immobilizes the victim as he's forced to take the unbearable heat of the log. At this point, you see the victim's jeans have been stripped and you see the skin around his thighs peeling off. This is due to the severe burning done off camera. The victim continues rolling around, but when he turns over on his back, he is then burned with the log on the side of his neck. They stop burning the victim for a couple seconds and he then sits up. Then, another man pours a clear liquid over his head, completely soaking his hair, clothes, and face. The other man then places the red-hot log between his legs, burning his exposed genitals. And this is where things take a turn for the worst. The video then jump cuts again, and it shows the awful sight of the victim's head being set on fire as well as his genitals. The fire completely engulfed the victim's head, face, and shoulders. Though he is still alive rolling around on the ground, which is why people refer to this video as Ghost Rider 2.0. As the video continues, the men insult the victim as he's on fire. The video ends as the victim is still alive rolling around on the ground, but he has stopped screaming at this point. This could be due to his damaged vocal cords from the fire. There's no reports about the victim's fate, but it's safe to assume they ended up killing him. This video and case is absolutely horrific, and it's just sad and scary that stuff like this happens daily to people. Take this warning and never go searching for this video because it's absolutely horrible.
Harvey Weinstein is one of the worst sexual predators in American history, and he was able to get away with these horrific crimes for years, so let's take a look at his story. I'm going to warn you right now, we're going to go through some graphic details, so viewer discretion is advised. Harvey Weinstein was born in 1952 in Queens, New York. In his youth, he and his brother were concert promoters and brought a lot of musical acts to New York City, including bands like The Who and the Rolling Stones. And eventually, after making some money with his concert business, he and his brother started a film production company. This company was named Miramax, named after the Weinstein's parents, Miriam and Max. Miramax would go on to become one of the most successful companies in all of Hollywood. And I mean, just look at this. This is a sample of some of their films, from Scream to Tarantino films to No Country for Old Men. In the 90s and 2000s, you pretty much couldn't watch a good movie without seeing the Miramax logo up front. And this led Harvey Weinstein to have incredible power in Hollywood. I mean, this guy's touch was like the Midas touch. Pretty much anything he touched turned to gold. He and his brother just had this way of looking at movies where they could take even a bad movie and turn it into an overnight success. And people in Hollywood around this time said that they loved Harvey Weinstein. They were thanking him in all of their speeches at awards shows. They were claiming that he was one of the best people on the planet, that they loved him so much. Even people like Michelle and Barack Obama hosted him at one of their events. I mean, Harvey Weinstein was plugged up with the elitist of the elite. I don't know if that's how you say that. In 2005, Harvey and his brother left Miramax and started their own company, the Weinstein Company. And this company would also go on to produce a number of huge Hollywood films. And everything was going swell for Harvey. That is, until the year 2017. And also, before we get to that, I have to add in here that Harvey Weinstein was a hard supporter of Roman Polanski. He said that they should just let the case go and they should never charge Roman Polanski for what he did to a minor back in the 70s. So 2017 was a year of reckoning. And in October of that year, the New York Times and the New Yorker posted stories about various women that had come forward with allegations of assault against Harvey Weinstein. These had all been A-list Hollywood actresses that had been assaulted by Weinstein in public, in his hotel room, in his offices. And when this started coming out, I can remember people started to realize that Harvey Weinstein was an absolute monster. So according to all of these women that came forward, there was almost a pattern in Harvey Weinstein's assaults. He would invite promising actresses to come to his hotel room, his office, wherever he was staying, and he would act like this was going to be a business meeting or something that they had to come to. But when they would get there, he would be in a state of undress. He might have been in a bathrobe or in his underwear. He would ask them for a massage, and when they would say no, or even if they would participate in it, things would take a dark twist and he would then assault them. There were also dozens and dozens of other A-list celebrities and women who came forward who said that even though he hadn't physically assaulted them, he had harassed them so many times that they had to tell him to stop. There are also actresses out there that claim that because they rejected Harvey Weinstein's advances, he totally ruined their careers in Hollywood. He would go forth and make sure they could never work on a production in Hollywood, and he basically put a stop on their careers, even if they were getting really big. So this is really a story of power. Harvey Weinstein had so much unchecked power in Hollywood because he was such a successful producer and head of such a big studio that he was allowed to do whatever he wanted to. And in my opinion, lots and lots of people knew that this was going on, people that worked closely with Harvey, and they just chose to say nothing for so many years, which I think is just so utterly and completely disgusting. I also do want to note here as well that Harvey Weinstein was really good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and he and Jeffrey had invested together in the past. So all this came to a head when on May 25th, 2018, Harvey Weinstein was finally arrested. And eventually, after the trial, Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison in New York, and he was set to serve his sentence out on Rikers Island, one of the most notorious prisons in all of America. Eventually, he was extradited to Los Angeles, where he took part in another trial, and just this year, he was sentenced to 16 more years in California. This means that his prison sentence is almost 40 years long, and hopefully he'll never see the light of day again. This is a story of power, of corruption, and how so much unchecked power can lead to some of the worst things imaginable. And it shows that even the elite members of our society aren't fully protected or given immunity from their crimes. And that even for Harvey Weinstein, when the bell tolls, sometimes you have to answer the call.
Killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving license. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defense. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course."